Hello and welcome to the First Right Podcast, a weekly conservative news show brought to you by Restoration of America. I'm your host, Jerry Ewalt, and today we are blessed to have on our show Dr. Jennifer Morse, founder of the Ruth Institute, an interfaith international coalition to defend the family unit in today's chaotic society. All right, well, Jennifer, it is a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me. I have had a great time interviewing your colleague, Hayden Ludwig. We talked with him about his very good report that he did on Warren Buffett and Warren Buffett's funding of abortion, just appalling amounts of money that these people have put into promoting abortion and contraception and all the rest of it. So
yeah, the butcher of Omaha, we like to call him around here. But yeah, and I think that fits in perfectly with the topics we're going to be talking about, which is some very contentious issues in terms of gender and family. But before we get into all those details, and we want to hear from you on this, just give us a little bit about your background and tell us a little bit about the Ruth Institute.
Okay, so the Ruth Institute is an international interfaith coalition to defend the family and build a civilization of love. And I got interested in family issues because in 1991, we adopted a 2.5-year-old boy from a Romanian orphanage. And then 6 months later, I gave birth to a baby girl. And so we had in our home 2 children, 3 years apart in chronological age, but they arrived within 6 months of each other. And so it was kind of like a controlled experiment, you could say, what my husband and I concluded is that, you know what? Kids really, truly need their parents. And if the parents are absent or negligent in important ways, it's absolutely devastating for the development of the child. The children have a developmental window, a period of time. They only get 1 year to be a 2-year-old, and if mom and dad are preoccupied with a new boyfriend or new girlfriend, or mom and dad are quarreling because they never got married, or all these different things that are now routine in our culture. If mom and dad are preoccupied and not really available to attach the baby, it's really hard to make that up afterwards, And so that experience convinced me. That experience, I should say, Jerry, moved me from being a free market economist who takes laissez-faire, let everybody do what they want as the default mode, and showed me that there's no invisible hand that's going to raise kids for you. You can't just let people do whatever they want and it'll all work out but through some invisible hand. That's not how the family works, and it just propelled me into thinking about the whole thing very differently.
So having children in the household, it really took your career in a totally different path. I mean, you're doing economics, and now here you are as the defender of the family unit as we speak today.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And a lot of my econ friends, one has to say, my very first book was called Love and Economics, and I wrote that over 20 years ago now. And the theme of that book was that the economy needs people to have a conscience and to control themselves, to keep their contracts, to not go into the supermarket and shoplift anything they can get away with, that we free market economists are counting on people to have some kind of self-command and ability to be reciprocal, respect other people. We're counting on that. Nobody's born like that, I mean, 2-year-olds don't respect property rights. I mean, you still have to do something, to move them along. And so that was the theme of Love and Economics. And I have to say that my economist colleagues who had some kind of faith background, they all understood exactly what I was saying.
Sure.
It didn't matter whether they were Jewish or Catholic or Mormon, they got it. But the ones who were purely secular went
Didn't
right
make
by
sense.
them, made them mad. So it's turned my life in a very different direction. I lost some friends and I got some new friends. So
that happens, and God clearly called you at the right time to kind of shift gears in what you were doing with your career. I think so. You founded the Institute in 2008, which was a very interesting time period in our country, right? Because at this time period, we were locked in a battle discussion, a debate around same-sex marriages. So we got Prop 8 Prop 8 in California, right, at this time, and then the Defense of Marriage Act passed by Bill Clinton. So there was a lot of movement going down the conservative path around, families and keeping it between a man and a woman. Now, flash forward to 2013, and the courts overturned both DOMA and Prop 8. So tell us a little bit about the impact that had on the family and what we see today?
Oh, criminy, how long do we have?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's funny that you mentioned Proposition 8 because when I founded the Ruth Institute in 2008, I thought the Ruth Institute was going to be something that would talk to young women about why the vocation of motherhood was really important and valuable, and they didn't have to wait until they made partner in the law firm or get tenure at a major university in order to start their families. It'd be okay to start a family sometime before menopause. That's what I thought I was going to be talking about and when I started the Institute in 2008. And then, since I was living in San Diego, Prop 8 just hit me, right? Because people don't necessarily realize this, but Proposition 8 really began in San Diego. The auxiliary bishop at that time was Salvatore Corleone, and he got a bunch of Catholic businessmen together to raise the money to put it on the ballot. And once it was on the ballot, then the whole coalition came together. So it was right there in my backyard, Jerry. And I didn't feel that I could sit it out and say, this is not my issue, don't want to get involved. I really couldn't do that. So it's totally a God thing, that I got thrown into the middle of that. I didn't choose. That's not a fight I chose, but I ended up from 2008 till 2013 for sure. I was debating this topic constantly, and it really I developed some important arguments that I've never heard anybody else use really, and in 2013 when they overturned DOMA and they overturned Prop 8, I was a campaign spokeswoman for Prop 8, and that's why I was out and about at law schools and church meetings and all kinds of things, and there for a while, golly, I'd go out one week and I'd have some arguments and they really worked, and everybody's like, oh, whoa, maybe she knows what she's talking about. And then the next week, that same stuff wouldn't work. I was like, what is going on here? So I really had a ringside seat in that whole thing, and I became completely convinced that to say children need a mother and a father, and we social conservatives aren't going to bracket off every other issue and we're not going to say anything about anything else, that was a big mistake. Okay. I always wanted to say kids need their own mother and their own father. Yeah. See, and as soon as you say that, now divorce is involved and single parenthood is involved and heterosexual couples using third-party reproduction, buying sperm and eggs, now that's involved. And what I want to say is all of that is objectionable. All of that is problematic. And we have to explain why and be prepared to say it without apology, because kids have a legitimate interest in knowing their own parents, And, yes. When the state says we're going to enforce a contract that makes a father a legal stranger to his own child, which is basically when a man masturbates into a jar and leaves it at the sperm bank, he has the assurance that he will never have any legal responsibility for that child. Well, that the state should allow such a thing, that the state should enforce such a thing. No, that's terrible. Really, I think, and I'm not ashamed to say that. It should all be outlawed. Gay people do it, that's not good. Straight people do it. No, it's just not good. It's not fair to the child. So,
well, Jennifer,
anyway.
I think it's clear that, through all these experiences, I mean, you got thrown onto the national stage and you were at the heart of all this for quite some time. And you wrote a book recently called The Sexual State: How Elite Ideologies Are Destroying Lives and Why the Church Was Right All Along. And in that book, you describe 3 interlocking ideologies that make up the sexual revolution that we see today. Just briefly describe those 3 ideologies and what impact that's having on the family today.
Yes. So, and this is something I developed when I was debating gay marriage,
Right.
because I finally figured out that in their minds, the people I was debating, they had already mentally redefined marriage. They just wanted to have the legal stuff come along behind it, see? And as I go through these 3 ideologies, you'll see what I mean. So the first big idea of the sexual revolution is that a good society should do everything possible to separate sex and babies. Okay, that you should be allowed to have as much sex as you want without ever having a baby. If you have quirky lifestyle preferences, maybe later someday you can have a baby. But, basically sex is a sterile activity, and that's the norm. Everybody should be able to expect sex to be a sterile activity. I call that the contraceptive ideology. And that's obviously at the heart of the demand for abortion, right? Because
Yes.
all contraception fails sometimes, and so abortion the backup plan. So anyway, um, now you put that into the context of gay marriage. Of course, every gay marriage is sterile because their sex is intrinsically sterile. So if in your mind you've already said, well, sex is sterile activity, doesn't really have anything to do with babies, you've kind of already separated yourself a little bit from a defensive marriage. All right.
Yes.
So then the second ideology says that a good and decent society should separate both sex and babies from marriage. That you don't need to be married in order to have sex. You don't need to be married in order to have a baby. And marriage is, a problem. It's unnecessary restriction on people's liberty. And the underlying thought behind that, which is seldom completely expressed, but the underlying thought is that kids don't really need their parents. Right, that the parents can shuffle their relationships as much as they want, their relationships, their sexual commitments, and their sexual activity, their living arrangements. They can shuffle all that around whenever they want, and the kids are going to be fine. Because kids are resilient, you see. Kids are so resilient that they'll be fine. If the parents are happy, the kids will be happy. And I call that the divorce ideology, right? And it obviously includes not just divorce, but also unmarried parenthood, the way we have normalized unmarried parenthood, especially for the poor, and also all the third-party reproduction things that I was just talking to you about. Right. That you should buy a father for your child, that you should buy genetic material for your child, right, but never have a
designer
father.
Babies. Right.
So again, taking that into the context of the debate over whether we should have something like gay marriage. We've already decided that kids don't really need their parents, so what difference does it make if mom picks another girlfriend instead of another boyfriend? Whatever. And then the final ideology is what I call the gender ideology. This one has had a number of morphs, a number of different changes and elements to it. But the underlying idea, Jerry, is that the sex of the body is not particularly significant for anything. And so we can overwrite the sex of the body. So in the early days of feminism, men and women were supposed to be completely equal, and any differences that you saw between men and women were unjust, and we should wipe them out and do anything possible so that anything we could to make sure that the girls and the boys played in the same number of sports leagues and things like that. But now we've gotten to the point where the sex of the body is so irrelevant that if a person wants to be the other sex, that we are supposed to overwrite the body with technology and with medicine, right, and with legal constraints that say, well, now that I've said I'm a man, you have to call me he, or I'm going to get mad at you or whatever. Right. And so all of that is really, a kind of mind-body dualism, which is one of the oldest heresies of the church when you really think about it. This is what St. Augustine was fighting. This is what St. Thomas Aquinas was fighting in the Middle Ages, the idea that the body is irrelevant and it's all about the spirit and the mind and all this stuff. But that's the gender ideology. And of course, that's directly related to gay marriage, right?
Well, as Solomon would say, there's nothing new under the sun. So this is a repeat of things that we've seen throughout history. And as I heard you talk about these three ideologies, it feels like it's a progression, right? So you started with contraceptive, then you went to divorce, and then gender. We seem to be in a third phase of the ideologies that you're describing.
I think that's right. Yeah. I mean, they're interlocking chronologically. A lot of the things are getting rolling around the same time. So. Griswold versus Connecticut, the Supreme Court decision that overturned any restrictions on the use of contraceptions by married people. That was 1965. 1968 is the beginning of no-fault divorce. Right. 1973, of course, is Roe versus Wade, and the whole feminist revolution is in that mix as well. So I think it is good to see them as interlocking. Because what they all come down to, what they all point to, is a certain view of human sexuality right. and its place in our lives. Okay, so as Christians, we have one view of human sexuality. The sexual revolution has a different view of human sexuality. Yeah. They think it's a recreational activity, and that all the old taboos were unnecessary and probably harmful. People are getting neurotic because they can't have enough sex, that kind of thing.
Right.
That's where they are. And we're over here saying, no, sex is sacred, and every child is a gift from God,
Yes.
and that every human being has the right to come into existence as an act of love between their mother and their father. And the child is procreated. We don't make the child. We procreate. We cooperate with God, and
Right.
His love and our love comes together to make that child. And all of that's built into the body. So we embrace the body. We're not mad at the body. We're not at war with the body all the time, which the sexual revolutionaries, for all their self-indulgence, they are also at war with their own bodies.
Yeah.
Kind of crazy.
No, we're seeing that very clearly with the gender transitions going on right now. It's so sad to see these stories, and we'll jump into that a little bit. But what it's clear to me is that we didn't just back into the sexual revolution. This isn't something that just kind of happened over time. This is a strategy. So I want to ask you, what is the point? Why is all this happening? Who is putting forth this strategy, and what is the end game?
Oh, listen to you. Aren't you good? This is why we liked your colleague, Hayden Ludwig, okay? Because he's got his finger on one of the very important elements of it. So let's take it in reverse order, the gender ideology. The gender ideology, the end game of the gender ideology, and I think people can see this now, the end game is to remove male and female as legal and social categories, to have all of that swept away, okay? That's where they want to be. And why do people want that? Well, that's an interesting question, but somehow our maleness and femaleness offends their sense of equality, because men and women are never 100% equal, right? And so if you're really obsessed with equality, you're going to be, it's going to be a continual irritant to you. And likewise amongst my free market economist friends who are radical individualists, a lot of them, the fact that you as an individual, every single individual acting as an individual is sterile. You have got to have the cooperation of another person in order to have a baby. And maybe you love the other person, maybe you make a purchase at the sperm bank, but you got to have that other person somewhere along the line, And so I think a lot of our radical individualist friends are offended by male-female differentiation, So that's the end game for those guys. The end game for the divorce ideology is, and I've seen this, trust me, I've seen this in law reviews back in the day. They want contract parenting, Jerry. They want contract parenting. And what that means is that there's no presumption that the biological, the people who contribute the biological material should have a privileged position in being considered the legal parents of the child. See,
the state owns the child, not the parents, is where you're going.
Well, yeah, ultimately, yes.
Yeah.
But where they think they're going is we 2, 3, 4 adults are going to make a contract, and we're going to decide, and we're going to work together. And there's no biological privilege, the fact that you're the real mama shouldn't privilege you in any way, And what they don't realize is that that they think that's going to make them free. But what they don't realize is that it is going to be the state in the end that decides, right? Because whatever the rules the state has for resolving disputes, that's what's going to kick in. And you could see that already, Jerry. You could see that already in 2010, 2011. You're already seeing these lesbian custody cases that were in dispute, and how the judges would decide them. If you had an ideological judge, how they decided, and how they were, massaging the existing statutory laws and stuff like that. But the radicals, that's what they want. They want contract parenting because it's individualistic, you see. It's all the adults getting to make choices. See, that's how they think. And then the contraceptive ideology, this is where your buddy Hayden Ludwig is totally correct. The end game of that is population control, 100%. 100%. The people financing that, the Warren Buffetts of the world, John D. Rockefeller III, the first and still most problematic in a way, George Soros, Bill Gates, all these people, these billionaires, they think there are too many people in the world. And the end game of the contraceptive ideology is population control, and plain and simple. So, there's nothing, this elevator hasn't hit the bottom floor.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with it. Obviously, it's a shame what's going on, but it's having devastating consequences to everything. I mean, you're an economist. You can tell the economy, our family life, our cultures, our values. It's across the board. So, Jennifer, give us some. What can people like everyday citizens who are really against this? I'll call it evil ideologies. What can they do to stand up against this?
So the first thing you have to have is you have to be confident that you're right. Okay. People come to your channel because they agree with you. Okay. But on these issues, on the marriage and family issues, people have a lot of trouble standing firm, often because they have family members that they're in conflict with over various things. Okay. And that is, it's diabolical, really, the way it breaks up families, But you won't stand firm unless you're really sure that you're right, okay? And so that's really where the Ruth Institute comes in. If you sign up for our newsletter, you'll hear from us every week, and you'll get some tidbit about this or that and how you can confront it, maybe some evidence about it, because we'll interview an expert on the subject, that kind of thing, so that you can feel confident that the intuitions that you have based on your own experience and based on, what your mom taught you and what you're learning in your church and so on, that those intuitions are correct. And so confidence is the number one thing that you need. And then once you have that, well, then you can do all kinds of things. Then you can be going down to your school board and throwing a fit, or you can be going over to your library board, or one of my followers, I stay in touch with a lot of the, when people donate to me, I call them, I talk to them and stuff like that. And they tell me things that they do, so I have a follower who was himself a graduate of one of the military academies, and he found out there was a DEI safe space reading room at the academy. And he's going, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. Like, these kids who come in there, from good conservative red states, they're going to be comfortable in a DEI exclusion, So he wrote a detailed letter. He wrote a letter to whoever it was at this service academy. He said, I have some books to donate to you. And he donated books along our side, And so whoever you are, wherever you are, you need to bloom where you're planted. You need to tend your own garden. And so I can't tell you every detail of what you need to do in your spot, but I do know that you're going to feel better if you're doing something, and you're going to be more effective if you're confident, that you know what you're talking about, right? And so that's why, and you know what, we have a new report that I put out that we give to everybody when they sign up for a newsletter. It's called Refuting the Top 5 Gay Myths. And basically it's just systematically taking down the claim that people are born gay and all the things that flow from that, just showing this. What's the latest science, actually? There's no gay gene, people. There's no gay gene. Come on. And just kind of going through it in a systematic way. So if you sign up, that's what you get. And that's the kind of stuff that you get. You could just crash into our website and you'll find something on every page, or something, that you can use. So.
Well, Jennifer, this is great. I really enjoyed our discussion. I think very informative, and you have so many resources available. So I just want to say thank you for all that you're doing. I mean, you've been doing so much for such a long period of time. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I just want to say God bless you and keep up the fight, because we need you.
Well, thank you so much, Jerry. It's a pleasure getting acquainted with you and your organization, and I really appreciate being your guest today.
All right, well, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting conservative media. Don't ever forget that by working together and staying diligent, we conservatives can bring our country back to true greatness. Until next week, let's all keep praying that God will continue to bless America.
First Right, a new kind of news summary without the liberal slant. Every morning, in your inbox, always free. Subscribe by texting First Right to 30161. That's First Right, all caps, one word, to 30161.